All right, let's talk to global security analyst Dixon Osage, who joins me here in the studio. Good morning, Dixon. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much, Ladi. Good morning.
I'm going to start with the same question I asked my previous guest, Dr. Ogu, which had to do with the fact that so many of those who are in a position to help end this conflict are receiving threats from both sides. As part of our bulletin this morning, the Chinese were being told by the West that if they offered any material help to Russia, they would be the target of all these sanctions. And the question I asked is, do you think that that's something the Chinese would take seriously, considering that China is in Russia?
Well, I think they're going to take it very seriously because the way the war is going, first of all, Putin underestimated the resistance capability of the Ukrainian forces. If you go by the mechanical point of view, yes, the Russians are more equipped by the Ukrainian. Go by the people point of view, oh, yes, they have thousands of troops than the Ukrainians. But first of all, we must understand that the battle begins from the mind, you know. If once your mind is prepared, you go all out to engage your enemy because Putin is trading human lives for territorial gain. So if China feels like, or they want to support Russia in this unnecessary invasion of Ukraine, I think they are going to receive a global response.
That then brings me to what you talked about, the war being unnecessary.
Oh, yeah.
Russia seems to think that its security is being affected by having a neighbor, in this case, Ukraine, thinking about going into the EU, into NATO, and all of that, and that all attempts to make them seizing, quote and unquote, failed, and which was why it was doing this. On the other hand, Ukraine says it's a sovereign country and should be allowed to do whatever it pleases once that is in its interest.
All right.
The immovable force meeting the irresistible object. So, given that kind of situation, this is a fight to the death, it appears.
Oh, sure, yeah. Because what Putin is trying to do is that he's trying to gain more territory because he had already perceived the threat from the West as well. And he doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO and also having some United States military base that will pose threats within the Russian Confederation. So he tried to go all out to see if he could quickly invade Ukraine or achieve victory in respect of the forthcoming May 9 celebration, but so disappointing that he never achieved that victory because he underestimated the Ukrainian people, like I earlier said. So for me, I think Putin is ill-advised by his advisors, and they are afraid to tell him the truth because he actually thought that in getting to Ukraine, once the president flee, I think he's going to have an easy access. I'm so proud of the president of Ukraine because he was offered a ride, and he said, no, I don't need a ride. I need ammunition. If he had taken that ride, like I tell you for free, Ukraine, by now, I would not be talking about Ukraine. Maybe Putin would have succeeded in his ill activities. But the president stood by the people of Ukraine without experience. This is a president that does not have military experience, does not have a battlefield experience, but he stood by the people of Ukraine and said, I don't need a ride. I need ammunition. And the West and the Americans and other parts of the world began to supply him ammunition and also sanctioning Russia. You know, the sanctioning of Russia, I'm seeing it as a long-time effect because it's not going to affect Russia at the moment. It's going to be a long-time effect because we're talking about human lives now. I would expect the Americans to do more to ensure that we don't lose more lives in Ukraine.
How do we then, I mean, the last point you made now, which is that even after we have said who is guilty and who is not and all of that, the overall objective should still be that the loss of lives, destruction of property and all that should stop.
Yeah, should be mitigated, yeah.
Now, how do we go about that? Some people have said, okay, first things first, Russia should withdraw from Ukraine. But even if the Russians withdrew from Ukraine, which I'm not saying they have said they will do, but if they do so, what is left behind in Ukraine now is a vast wasteland, a lot of destroyed infrastructure, a lot of deaths. Yeah. So that's that withdrawal is not going to by itself accomplish anything, is it?
Yeah, it's not going to accomplish much, but first of all, when you want to place priority in any given society, human lives come first. So we must place premium and priority on human life. So if peradventure Russia decides to take a withdrawal today, I think there will be mitigation in this area of human lives because Russia are losing more equipment by the day. When you go to battlefield assessment and the loss assessment from European assessment so far, I think Russia have lost about 17,000 lives, soldiers. Then going by their tanks, they've lost about 135 warplanes. They've lost a lot of thousands of war tanks, and that's why they want to call in for support from China and so on. But for me, if they take a withdrawal presently or right now, it's going to play a big role in Ukraine. I think most of these guys in Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, more than 4 million people have, flee Ukraine as we speak. Yeah. And when you look at the ethnography of Ukraine, they only have about 44 million people in Ukraine. And when you look at the military size of Ukraine, apart from just reserves, which is about 900,000 troops, while they have about 300 to 500 active troops, you discover that Russia are more powerful. Yeah. But the support the Ukrainians are getting all over the world is very, very magnanimous. So for me, if Russia try or admits to take a withdrawal, it's going to be a relief to the world, and also economical-wise, psychological-wise, physiological-wise, the world will have a good breathing space.
Given that scenario, then, if Russia decides to take a withdrawal, as we've just posited now, all right, would you say that as part of that, the Ukrainians also should also be placed under an embargo of arms to force them to consider peace?
Well, Eladi, you see, that's an intelligent question. You see, when Russia went to Crimea some few years ago, that's boosting the morale of the Ukrainian forces, and they trained over 200 to 300 soldiers, almost 700 soldiers on reserve, because they knew that there's an imminent threat, and they had expected this day to come, and they were prepared. But Russia thought that immediately they get to Ukraine, it will be an easy way. But thank God for Zelensky, because that's why we talk about leadership. Leadership is very, very essential in every day of time. If Zelensky had not stood his ground in the Ukrainian space, I tell you, Russia would have had its way. But for me, if there's going to be any form of a tactical withdrawal from Russia, there's no victory in this battle. There won't be any victor, because even if Russia withdraw or Ukrainian forces try to also, suppress the Russian invasion, there will be no victor, because a lot of lives have gone down. So for me, I will advise President Putin to fall back to his national security advisors to also re-strategize how they will allow Ukraine to lead. Ukraine is a sovereign state. It's a democratical state. And when you go into history, Ukraine has been in existence over 1,800 years ago. So they will
even before Russia.
Before Russia. So they will not put their future in the hands of Russia. The fight that is going on in Ukraine is a decider once and for all to foster futuristic invasion by Russia.
Given that, my final question to you would, of course, be that, like in most conflicts, the African continent is a spectator in all of this. Okay. Even though we are bearing some of the consequences in the increased prices of goods and services, commodities, and all of that. Okay. Do you think there's a bit of a lesson in what is going on in Ukraine right now for African countries? Because it's not as if Africa
many lessons.
doesn't have its own conflicts too.
Many lessons. You see, when you look at the World War I, World War II, and what triggers World War II, you discover that it sprang up from the coalition. Now, if Americans have not applied a form of systematic and tactical approach, it would have escalated to World War III. What is happening in Ukraine could spring up to World War III. But I thank God for West and other world leaders that are trying to, mitigate the situation so that it does not escalate. Now, going by your question, Ladi, I think it's the right time for us as a nation. Nigeria, let me talk about Nigeria, for example, to be very prepared. We've been battling with insurgents for over 12 years. I see that as a friendly match. What if we have a form of national attack or international battle, just like Russia and Ukraine? It's going to be a big one. So I will advise our government to see what is happening in Ukraine as an avenue for us us to start developing our military capability, developing our air defense, developing our sea defense and our ground defense, so that we will not suffer from most of these unnecessary human beings that have taken the lives of Nigerians, like nothing. So for me, I think the war in Russia should be a stepping stone to every nation in Africa to be prepared for the wars, because the best time to prepare for war is peacetime. If you don't have good systematic approach, mechanical-wise, technological-wise, and physiological-wise to prepare in time of war, at peacetime, I think when wars spring up, you will be losing more men and you will have yourself to blame because you were never prepared.
That's a very good place to hang it, Dixon Osage. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Ladi.
Thank you for your
Thank you for all you do, Channels TV.
Thank you very much.
All right.